Morning, everybody.
Hello.
Why don't we start by introducing ourselves? Chris, do you mind going first?
Sure. As a short person, these tall chairs make me nervous. I'm Chris James. I am the CFO for the Viterbi School of Engineering at the University of Southern California. And I think that's pretty clear. So I'm an administrator. I'm not faculty.
And I'm Nick Dazé. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Heirloom. We're building no-code tools for enterprise-scale applications of managing verifiable credentials, decentralized IDs, and other tokenized assets on the blockchain. Something like as a little bit of context for our conversation, I'd love to kind of recap what my co-founder and CTO Julian spoke about a couple weeks ago at Apex in Las Vegas. And it was that we're deeply interested in the reality that blockchains are revolutionary and very useful in a broad swath of applications. But they were kind of born without a sense of identity as a primitive. And that leads to some distortions and problems that many people in this room, whether in a research capacity or an operational capacity, are trying to solve. In finance, that looks a lot like KYC AML compliance and some of the solutions that we've all kind of engineered to comply with those regulations. And in the NFT space, that looks a lot like problems with fraud and counterfeit that have started to crop up with those technologies. So we think the solution to that is a paradigm of decentralized IDs on-chain that are owned by the end user and verifiable credentials that are signed by organizations. In this case, we're going to talk about universities as those organizations that are signing credentials and then are issued to students, alumni, administrators, faculty, et cetera, who then take custody of it and can present those credentials in a privacy-preserving, self-sovereign way. We think it's pretty exciting. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing together, what we will be doing together in the coming months and years between USC, the University of Southern California, and Heirloom. We also, at the end, will take questions, and I would love to talk about how we can solve problems and partner with all of you in the audience. So for starters, Chris, why don't we talk a little bit, why don't you share with the crowd a little bit about some of the kind of administrative issues or opportunities that you think credentials, generally speaking, whether they're on-chain or off, where credentials can help university life generally?
Sure. I think the challenge, there's no challenge. Universities give degrees. That's what we do. I think that every faculty member here who has spent any time teaching in a specific program knows that things change and there's this desire to have utility to specify, be very specific, especially when you think of the transfer of a student to the workforce, highlighting different aspects of their education and so that student can present the story they want to a potential employer. The idea that a blockchain solution or something to this nature is not new in the sense of we want to really tell the full story of what the educational experience was, but what is new to this technology now is this sort of universality and the permanency, the permanent nature of what you would be issuing. This very specific use case would be something like at USC, at the engineering school, we have, to my knowledge, so if one of your schools does this, I apologize, but to my knowledge, we have the only undergrad-led student group, meaning they self-fund, they put all the effort in, they have a faculty advisor out of safety, but the faculty advisor does not tell what to do. They're the only student team in the world, undergrads, that have put a rocket into space. Okay, all the way into space, whatever that, many of you know what that means. There's a line that they have to get above. These students all want to tell that story. It's a fascinating year-long project every year. And, it'll be a part on their resume, but they're student-led. So every year, it's a new set of students come in, and trying to verify that a couple of years down the later, when they want to switch and work at SpaceX or something, is very difficult. So something like on-chain credential, in a social, it would be amazing in that.
Yeah, and I think what you're getting at that really excites me, and we've talked a lot about this, is this idea that, of course, degrees on chain is and will be a great functionality. It's a really obvious use case, and we've all probably read a dozen think pieces on the internet about it. And yet something that I get really excited about is how once you go beyond the degree and start to look at the tokenization of these discrete experiences that students and faculty have in an academic context, that can be meaningful and can be valuable, but today are really hard to verify, especially in a kind of low latency and kind of composable way. And so thinking about memberships in various groups, memberships in organizations that roll up into a university, authorship of research, even some use cases in kind of an alumni context, whether that's building communities or groups for research purposes, fundraising purposes, even just networking purposes. This is all stuff that we all do and want to do, but the burden of proof is quite high, and we're talking about lowering that burden of proof.
Yeah, I think probably the most, like the feel-good part of this is that universities across the world are trying to get new voices. We need new students from different backgrounds. Those new voices bring new ideas, and it benefits everybody. One thing, in the U.S. that can be a challenge is, when you're talking to a prospective student who comes from a history where maybe there's not a lot of influencers around them that have a college experience, trying to explain to them what you get at a really high-touch university versus a more teaching-focused, non-research focused institution. It's sometimes hard to explain why it's so valuable. You don't have to, for fourth-generation college student family, you don't have to explain anything. They know what's going on. They know why it's valuable. But to a potential student who that doesn't have influence, it's terrifying, and it's a very and sometimes they will choose institution that will end up costing them even more money, but doesn't have nearly the opportunity because it looks more similar to the life that they know. So having having the opportunity to issue tokens that tell the full story will allow to tell the full story to a potential student and really attract that new voice into the academic environment.
Yeah. How do you think about verifying a degree or participation in a club? How do you think about that with regard to almost brand preservation? I mean, that's a little bit of a weird question, but I mean, many universities around the world are some of the strongest and oldest brands that we all interact with in our daily life. And unfortunately, this is a little bit of a negative tangent, but people lie sometimes, right? People fraudulently claim that they got a degree from somewhere, or that they co-authored a research paper, or were participated in a club or group. And at the end of the day, while that's kind of a negative and harmful behavior, it also decrements or undermines the brand of the university itself. So I'm curious how you think about brand preservation, for lack of a better description, from a university perspective, and how these technologies might help strengthen and strengthen the brand of the university.
Yeah, I mean, there's countless. I mean, I have a colleague at Harvard, and he was telling, now, unverified, but he told me that there's more people on LinkedIn with Harvard degrees than there's ever been issued Harvard degrees. Right. So that's a problem. That's a problem. But joking aside, a verified credential, where the good example of this is we hired a vice dean of research for our university, very prominent, very respectable position, 2-year-long search. It took him, he's 60 years old, right? He had to verify his academic credentials, and he was calling universities all over India, trying to get them to get the transcripts. And it took him, at an average, he counted it out as a researcher would. It took him 6 hours per university to get his transcripts sent. Mm-hmm. Okay, And he had to pay. I think it was $10 for each school.
Sure.
So you can see all the effort that is expended at universities to try and verify people. Having a third-party verified, instant check that is fantastic. That you can give that. The other thing that's really fascinating for a university like mine, where we're private, so fundraising is vital. And when a lot of students graduate, 6 months after they graduate, that .edu becomes alumnus.edu. And they go bye-bye. They disappear on a massive level. We never see them again or hear from them again. Having a token that, and I know the technologies, and I'm not a blockchain expert, obviously, but my vision of it is this permanent connection to that person. And when you're talking about brand, you can't think of many things in your life where after you use the product, for 40 years, you'll still be wearing a T-shirt of that product. That's, the brand identity we have with our schools is massive. So to have that token connection to them in perpetuity is got all kinds of applications. Academic, understand when people got a degree, where they ended up working. What are we missing certain niches in our specific degree courses? So there's lots of applications where this becomes really valuable.
I mean, you just jogged my memory on a user that we talked to pretty early on in our process of developing this product, and it was a student that was a first-generation college student, and this student was a transfer to the University of Southern California, and he took out some student loans and had gotten into the school, but it was provisional, I think, the way he described it, because his transcript from I think it was a community college, had not kind of made its way through the system successfully. And it took 3 separate attempts. I don't know what specifically went wrong, and obviously I hope this is an edge case, but he had described 3 separate attempts to get the transcript sent from his community college in order for his kind of admission to not be kind of provisional. And this is a kid that's on the hook for quite a lot of money, and he was, I think, 3/4 of the way through his first year at USC before he thankfully got the green light that everything was okay. But the idea that proving something about himself, took that long when we live in a world where our expectation is millisecond latency of apps and experiences and data transfers, that sounds really broken to a lot of us, I hope. Certainly sounds broken to me. And I see a world, and we're helping to build a world where cryptographically proving these claims, these very valuable and economically important claims about myself and yourself, can have that millisecond latency, but a dramatically higher burden of proof is good for the world. I think there are a lot of people on the other side of that transaction that would say, well, yeah, there's a reason it takes so long. There's a reason it's so expensive, because it's really, really deleterious for us to release a transcript before we've proven it, before we've authenticated it. That's part of the rigor that we want to apply to these academic use cases. It's part of our academic integrity. It's part of the brand of our university. So what we're saying is that we can have our cake and eat it too, that we can meet or raise that burden of proof for the university in these high-touch circumstances, but we can do it in a digital, low-latency way so that we can open up entirely new user experiences for, again, students, faculty, researchers, administrators, et cetera.
Yeah. What you're talking about, though, it's fascinating. Administration in general at university is a difficult subject, and it's hard to they tend to be understaffed and very dated systems. And so one of the segue I would mention on this is introducing new concepts at universities like this. As any researcher knows, I mean, if you're an individual faculty member and you want to get something implemented university-wide, or even if you're in a school like USC where we practice a model called RCM, which is Responsibility Centered Management, which means that every school really is its own thing. Like you kind of eat what you kill. If you do really well, you keep the funding after you've paid sort of your share to the university, and then you can reinvest it in your school. So it's very entrepreneurial, but also means that it's to try and cut down bureaucratic, but it has its pluses and minuses. The minuses are that every school within the university is doing their own thing at their own pace, and therefore at the central part of the university there's a they kind of rule or kind of guide in a constant state of panic that someone's going to do something that introduces a lot of risk to the university.
Right.
And so, talking about these ideas that, you're pursuing as a company, we're pursuing as a university, the amount of work it has taken bureaucratically to get these sort of approval to do these ideas is staggering.
Yeah.
We have an initiative that we're moving forward with, similar to what we've been talking about here, that I have spent, I'm not going to exaggerate, I think I've maybe spent 200 hours on it, so far, and it's meeting with trademark committees, legal committees, all different types of essential university. And every time you're having those conversations, you're having to re-educate on what blockchain is, and why we're not trying to introduce our own cryptocurrency, which is what everyone thinks we're doing, or we're trying to, do a Bored Ape kind of NFT.
Yeah, I think we should double click on that because I think this is probably going to sound familiar to a lot of people in the audience. There is an intrigue about blockchain and yet a lot of fear, quite frankly, if I'm going to be very blunt and direct. I think all of you are probably very knowledgeable. You're all probably true believers because you're here. But I'm sure you've had conversations at your universities or organizations that sound similar to what Chris just described. Universities have a higher burden of proof, as we've talked about before. They have often very elite and long-standing reputations, and they want to preserve that, and that leads to some conservative thinking. So some of the objections we've heard together and have had to address and I think have successfully overcome are pretty simple questions. Hey, I've heard blockchains burn down the rainforest. Is that what's going to happen if we start issuing degrees on chain? And we talk a bit about not only the differences between different chains. This is an area where I believe Ripple and the XRP Ledger really excel. And kind of doing that education about being thoughtful stewards of the planet and at the same time leveraging these new technologies. That's something we've spent a lot of time talking about. Another one is I would say fear and doubt about NFTs. This is a very powerful technology that all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with, that has gotten a really kind of big branding problem on its hands, that a lot of these very kind of speculative use cases got a lot of media attention really quickly, and now you have kind of senior administrators that are reading about monkey pictures in the Wall Street Journal, and they're worried about Heirloom bringing this to their university and kind of undermining their brand, which is of course not what we're doing. So I think it's important that we're vulnerable and transparent about some of the challenges we've faced together, explaining these technologies, explaining our unique approach about it, showing that we're thoughtful and that we're aligned really in our values and in our interests. We can talk more about it, but I felt the need to expound upon that a bit because I'm sure in some way, shape, or form, many of you have faced a lot of similar conversations in your enthusiasm for these technologies. Did I leave anything out about some of the hurdles that we've had to jump over?
I mean, we're a big football school, American football school, and so when the NIL, I mean, everything happened within the same 3 or 4 months. We had a student who also started issuing NFTs with one of our quarterbacks that looked very much like they were coming from the school. There's a lot of panic, so a lot of clamping down and committees formed and long conversations. But I will say to USC's credit, everyone wants to do it. They just want. Everyone's looking for the first very senior person to say yes. No one wants to be the first one to say yes, right? And but they'll all be like, so it's a consensus building. You're sort of a lobbyist in a lot of ways trying to do it, which is why I would say if you're a researcher or you're an individual faculty member, it's vital that you get a real true believer on the administration side to help push through and know every person you need to take to lunch and every and all the conversations you need to have, because it is, I don't think you could do it. You need both stories. Faculty are so powerful, the Faculty Senate, and the faculty can drive the message, but faculty tend to be very forward-thinking, and they move at a faster pace, which means just by the nature of a faculty member introducing the concept will cause the administrative side to pull that reins back a little tighter, because they're so used to faculty just going forward and going towards the future. And all they're looking for is that structure to make sure that the risk profile is reduced as much as possible. So it's vital you have someone like me on your side that can say, hey, it's going to be okay, it's fine. This is okay. This is a low risk situation.
Yeah, I think risk is an interesting way to put it. And that's from a product standpoint at Heirloom. We're true believers in these technologies. We're true believers, but we also see that the barrier to entry is still quite high. We talk to so many universities and so many big companies that say, yeah, we're really interested in these technologies. We see, or we at least have some hypotheses for how this can improve or change in a good way some of our processes or our experiences. But technologies are exotic. Chains have different pros and cons. I don't want to have to, hire an entire dev team in order to write a smart contract or something like that. And so something that we're really focused on is building no-code tools for our users. That's something that we've worked closely with Chris and USC on, is making sure that as smart and professional and committed as everyone in the administration is, everyone in the faculty is, not everybody is a computer scientist. Not everybody is a programmer, and that traditionally, like I said, has made the bar very high to clear. So what we're building are no-code tools that let, and again, I'm not an engineer either. My CTO is, my business partner is. It's so easy, even I can use it, right? Is the joke that we sometimes make. But the idea that an administrator, a faculty member, even a leader of a student group can use this software to start issuing credentials on chain is really exciting, because it lowers that risk, right? It lowers the technical complexity, it lowers the time cost, it lowers the financial cost, and we see that as a net good for the entire ecosystem, because when you lower the cost, you lower the time, you lower the learning curve, well, then that lets us all experiment with much lower latency, right? We can get many more iterations in and start using and experimenting with these technologies. I mean, a really kind of values-based saying we have at Heirloom is that we haven't had our best idea yet, and that's something that I think applies to everyone. I think it's a fundamentally optimistic value or an optimistic expression, but when we do have those great ideas, the faster we can validate or invalidate them, the better. And right now, blockchain-based technologies, in my opinion, have far too high a bar to clear for us to be iterating and experimenting at the pace that we should be and that we need to be to help make these technologies go mainstream. And so that's something I find myself monologuing a bit here about something very philosophical, but it's something that I think is important, and it's something that I think we're both excited about releasing into the hands of the university, because we have some great ideas, but I bet we haven't had the great idea yet, and it's probably going to be someone in the administration, someone in the student body, someone in the faculty that comes up with that idea. And my hope is not that we have all the good ideas. My hope is that putting these tools into the hands of the university allows you to have that great idea and for you to execute on it, and for us all to benefit from that.
Yeah. I know we're probably close to out of time, and if you want to leave some time for questions, but if not, find me, and I'll tell you what not to say to the administration, because I've learned that the hard way. We met in front of a big, huge committee, and but just to show you how clueless a university is on this, when this all came up, we met with Heirloom and a student group who wanted the university to start issuing NFTs within 4 days of each other. They both set points with the dean. I was the only one in the dean's cabinet, and I'm at the Engineering Computer Science School. I was the only one in the dean's cabinet who had heard of an NFT. And so I had to go to the meetings, which is why it's my project, because I'm the only one who knew what it was. And so when I turned around and went to the Central University, the person that headed the committee, and I mean everyone was on this committee at the senior university. I mean, they didn't know who it pertained to, so they threw everyone at it. I joked that if we minted an NFT and it cost us, I don't know, whatever, a couple $100 in gas prices, whatever it's going to cost, we just spent about 40 grand on it in time. So that's, because of all the people that were in these meetings. But we sat, we sat there, and as I was talking to them, I realized that the person heading the chair was our asset, vice president of asset, which means it's our facilities person. Like, he owns the buildings. Like, he guys that runs the construction projects. That's who chaired it, because it's like, well, it's an asset, right? And you're like, well, yeah, it is an asset, but it's not that kind of an asset, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of work. So if you have questions, I can tell you what not to say. That's what I can show you, what didn't work.
Well, yeah, let's take some questions. Looks like we have about a little less than 5 minutes.
Oh, I didn't know there was a counter right here. That's fantastic. So I've been wondering about that.
Yeah, right here.
That's great. Yeah.
Do we have a microphone for Q&A? Oh, yeah, back there.
Hi. Really appreciate what you said about the rather conservative nature of university stuff. By European standards, I'm at a university that's kind of new, established in 1740, University of Pennsylvania. So as startup-y as that may seem, I'm at the Wharton School, and I appreciated what you said about the nature of degrees as it shows up on LinkedIn. Maybe one of the reasons for that is because of executive education. I was wondering if you're thinking about a lower bar to get in here, perhaps credentialing for exec ed could be an opportunity. I was wondering if you were thinking about that.
Absolutely we are. Absolutely we are is the short answer. The medium answer is that we think that building an entire constellation of credentials around the various experiences that are either personally or economically valuable to you, or both, is really critical, and building an ecosystem of connectivity. So, I mean, you mentioned LinkedIn, right? That's something that I've seen referenced in think pieces on medium.com. It's a conversation we're having with LinkedIn and other platforms to give a verified badge next to a credential. And as you said, it could be a PhD. It could also be an executive ongoing training. It could be, as Chris sometimes calls them, a micro-credential of some kind. We want to help universities help their students and their community, their faculty and their alumni verify all of these experiences so that they can be more useful and more frictionlessly used in the market. So,
yeah, one thing I would say about exec ed and kind of certificate concepts that, I mean, anyone who runs an administration who works in the business of a school knows that the money's not in the certificate side of things. Now, there is some schools, I mean, Wharton has got a very different profile. Of course, Wharton would be a strong candidate for that. I mean, there's probably 3 schools that are in that category where your former dean, who is at USC now, Jed, is fantastic, and he's driving a massive blockchain initiative over at the business school. So obviously, that kind of credentialing is vital. But if you think of it from what the demand on the market is, it's master's degrees is what everyone wants. So when you look at the sort of targeted professional degrees that are being developed right now across the country to meet professional needs rather than an academic need, so rather than a master being the path to a PhD in academia and research, the sort of professional side and the application of whatever you're teaching, you're watching a lot of these come up. They're not the 40-hour, 44 credit programs anymore. They're down in the 24 range, which makes them a very targeted master's application. I think that, as these credentials start to become verifiable, they start showing up on LinkedIn, and we get away from the certificate concept, and somehow that's diminished. Like, why am I going to pay 14 grand for a certificate, which somehow doesn't have the oomph, and so I'll go and spend 60 grand on a master's for, that idea, that sort of the market will drive that change. We know, everyone in academia knows that needs to happen, because sort of degrees that sit in between major academia subjects is where all the business world is now. And so kind of developing those and getting getting the marketplace to accept those as the same value as a master's degree is part of the goal of all of this, because we all know that's what the workplace needs. We all need those specialties.
Let's squeeze one more in.
Kind of building on the last question, is Heirloom doing other VCs besides academic credentials? And then second part of the question, where are you issuing these credentials, these VCs?
Great question, and I can answer those very briefly. Answer to number one is absolutely yes. Academic credentials are an early interest to us because we think it lays a strong foundation of economically valuable credentials. However, we have some very early conversations that are very promising with some very big banks about issuing KYC AML credentials on chain and allowing consumers, financial product consumers, to present those credentials in order to get through a KYC process much more quickly in a much more privacy-preserving way. The second answer to your question is that we are going to be issuing these on the XRP ledger, although some of the work that the Ripple team is doing, particularly Anshul Malhotra, who spoke yesterday afternoon on introducing DIDs, decentralized IDs, as a primitive on the XRP ledger, is still forthcoming. And we're working with Ripple to make sure that that's implemented in a great and trailblazing way. But that is not currently ready on the XRP ledger. Our current model, our current product and offering is issuing DIDs on Polygon, but we see Ripple as our closest partner, and will be issuing those on the XRP ledger in 2023.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think we're done.
Yeah.
Get in touch with us if you want to talk at lunch. We'd love to help you do this at your university. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Chris and Nick.